welcome back to the Books Brothers podcast. We hope you had a Merry Christmas and happy holiday season. And with the new year right around the corner, we hope you have a happy new year. I'm Garrett.
I'm Matt.
I'm Adam.
I'm Fuzz.
Today we are going to take a pause on our reading and discussion of Endurance by Alfred Lansing. As the year has come to an end, we thought it would be appropriate to take some time, pause, reflect on 2024. We read fully 5 books as a group and are currently on our 6th one, and just thought it would be a good idea to rehash some of the highs, what we took away from it, what are some things we applied, what were our favorite parts, and kind of looking ahead to 2025. So a little bit different of an episode today, but I'm really excited for, just recapping a lot. You know, we're guys that work full time, we're raising families, and we do this as a hobby. We do this because we value the brother next to us and our friendship in this group. And we hope that this extension of this podcast has hopefully been an encouragement to you this year to read, reflect, and connect with others in your life as well. So we'll start it off by first giving a brief recap of the books we read this year. And each book was recommended by a different guy in the group. So I'll give the full rundown of the books we read if you haven't listened, and then kick it to each guy who recommended that book to give a brief recap. So the first book we read to kick off 2024 was Scarcity Brain by Michael Easter. We took a little bit of time off, recalibrated how we could continue to publish an episode each week, and reconvened in the spring and read Blue Zones by Dan Buettner. We then started the summer by reading Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. We started the school year off by reading Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. And we finished the year reading a novel called Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. So, Staylin, you recommended Scarcity Brain to the group. Could you give a brief recap of that book, why we read it, and what were, highlights?
Yeah, so we all, the first book we ever read as a book club, and not everyone was a part of the book club at the time, but was The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. And we just all loved the style of writing. We loved kind of this adventure component to his writing, as well as, I feel like as a group of men in our 30s who was speaking to a lot of things that we're passionate about. And so we wanted to read Scarcity Brain. So this book really talks about how our brains evolutionary are built for scarcity. So whenever we're essentially like hardwired to want more of something, in kind of the hunter-gatherer time periods, times of scarcity were such a thing, but now we're living in an age where you have access to anything and everything at just a click away, basically. And so this book really talked about how we have this brain that's designed for scarcity, but we live in a world that is no longer scarce. And so really he talked about ways that we can combat this scarcity brain, ways that we can kind of go against our kind of more primal self and really seek to live life in a more disciplined way, as well as a way that we want as we choose to live it, as opposed to like letting like kind of our primal self make decisions for us.
It's great. Thank you. And then the next book was Blue Zones by Dan Buettner, which Rob recommended. Rob, can you recap that book for us?
Blue Zone. So it had started because they had just came out with the Netflix documentary on it. And I remember watching it and then kind of talking about it with my in-laws, like, oh, have you seen this? This is kind of cool. And so when it just came around to other books, just knowing that, there are these people that are living or experiencing longevity. And I think we, have talked about the financial piece or the spiritual piece or the, professional side of things, but what about the health component too? And I know we all, are fairly healthy or maintain an active lifestyle, but it was cool to look back and, I was definitely eating way more vegetables. I was watching my intake. I was snacking less. And I still think that, I'm more conscious of that now than maybe I was before reading the book, but just learning about what other people are doing, where they are, their lifestyle, and how that's translated to longevity, and then thinking about that for our own lives was appealing to me for why I wanted to recommend that book.
Thanks, Rob. Next was Psychology of Money, which was my recommendation, which I can't really take credit for because my manager at work at the time recommended that one. Psychology of Money is essentially a compilation of small, you can almost think of news articles, lengths, a little bit of long form writing that you'd read in the New York Times, a compilation of about 20 of those into one book by the same writer, who, it's not necessarily financial advice. There is one or two chapters at the end where the author gives his personal financial model, how he budgets and plans. But ultimately, it's more observations about how money changes and impacts and affects our lives in various ways. And it was incredibly insightful. The conversations were really diverse. We all had a pretty similar background in one sense, where we were all raised, middle class families in the Midwest, and yet we all have a much different view or varying degrees of views on money, how to use it, how to save, spend it, and how it affects our lives and our families. It's a great read, and it's easy to just kind of pick up and read one little section at a time as you have time. So highly recommend it. The next one was a very timely book, Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. And Matt brought that one to our attention. Matt, can you explain what that book is?
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to read The Anxious Generation because as a parent, I wanted to prepare myself for kids with smartphones and how to deal with that. So the book explores the link between the rise of smartphones and social media and the link that they have for mental health issues, depression, anxiety, all that stuff, specifically for adolescents. I believe the age range was kids between 11 and 15 years of age. That's when it affects kids the most. And how, social media can greatly affect in a negative way adolescents' brains. It also explores the decline of play-based childhood. It advocates for kids playing outside, not in front of a TV, not with their smartphones, but just being in a community of other people, other kids, and having good influences in their lives. Yeah, I thought it was a great book, very timely, and I've been recommending it to a lot of friends and family who have kids as well. And I say, if you read one book in the next 5 or 10 years, if you have young kids, this would be the one book that I'd recommend right now.
Wow, that's a big recommendation right there, which we will get to. So glad to know we already know a little bit of Matt's answer. But no, in all seriousness, thanks, Matt. And then we rounded out the year by pivoting topics from adolescent brain development to Gates of Fire, about the more probably realistic interpretation of the Battle of 300. I'm sorry, I'm giving it away. This was Flez's recommendation. Flez, please share with us what Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield was about.
Yeah, so Gates of Fire is a historical fiction masterpiece that brings the Battle of Thermopylae to life. So the story is told through the eyes of Xiones, who's a Greek squire recounting his journey to the Persian court. Xiones, orphaned after his city is sacked, eventually finds himself in Sparta, training alongside warriors like Alexandros and Deinekes. Through brutal Spartan discipline and unyielding camaraderie, the men prepare for the ultimate test, defending Greece against Xerxes' Persian army. At Thermopylae, 300 Spartans and their allies face overwhelming odds. Their heroic stand lasts 3 days with waves of Persian attacks beaten back by Spartan discipline and valor. Despite their inevitable defeat, the Spartan sacrifice inspires Greece to unite, ultimately defeating Persia at Salamis and Plateau. Through Zione's eyes, the novel vividly explores themes of duty, courage, and brotherhood, immortalizing the Spartans' legendary heroism. So I picked the book because I love Spartan and Greek history, and I love the movie 300, and figured it would be a good book and have some good lessons for us as men that are trying to grow. And figured a bunch of dudes going to war together probably grow in some way. Figured there would be some good lessons in there for us, which there were.
Yeah, Flez, thanks for that recap. It was a really good book. And if you want to read the books, we highly recommend them. But if you also want to join us in our journey of recapping those books, please scroll back in time on our feed. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or YouTube or Spotify, and you can find all the episodes where we discuss the chapters. And each book has about 6 episodes per book that you can just follow along as we read them and as you read them. So hope you enjoy. So with that year in review, recapping the books we read, which one was your favorite and why?
My favorite was Blue Zones.
Ooh, okay.
My favorite personal read was Blue Zones. I really enjoyed learning about different cultures around the world and seeing their lifestyle, what they do every day, and what they eat. And I feel like it had really practical, easy things to take away from that you can implement every day in your life.
Yeah, for sure. I thought that was a fun one. I think one thing that I shared with you guys that Ruth and I did that I would strongly recommend for a date idea is we made a meal one night based on one of the Blue Zones, and it was just kind of a fun kind of bonding thing. Cooking together is always fun, but to kind of have a theme like that was really made it a little extra special.
It's awesome.
Flez, what about you?
I would say The Anxious Generation for me because it impacted me personally the most as far as an actionable step goes. Like I had already been, wanting to delete my Instagram for good, and it's just a timing thing of that desire to finally let go of it, and then us starting that book that was like, here's all the negatives about it. It's just like, oh, here's the sign from the Lord.
There you go.
Just let go. So I deleted it and never looked back. And it was a big delete because it's like, it took years of trying to grow a following in powerlifting and fitness and stuff, and just to let go of all the comparisons and all of it. It just feels good to live in the present and live in reality and not in the matrix. So
there you go, man.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as Flez there. I think Anxious Generations was my favorite read that we did this year. Kind of like with what Matt was sharing earlier. I think as a somewhat new parent, a lot of really practical stuff. As a consumer myself, I remember one chapter after I read it, I remember deleting like multiple apps on my phone. So it was like that action. And I think also, I've been off of Facebook for a couple of years now, off Instagram for a couple of years now. I mean, all of us are pretty non-involved on social media, but I think that there's been times where I felt like I'm being like an old curmudgeon and being off of social media. Like I'm like the grumpy man who's like complaining from his porch about what the kids are doing. But I do think that it did maybe give some, like Adam was saying, some validation to, these are good things to get out of the matrix, to get out of this fake world, to, I think it helps you enjoy your situation more, that encouragement as a parent to really avoid screens with Daphne at a young age, as a husband to, when Ruth and I are bored in the evening, not just turn the TV on, not just sit on our phones, but try to play a game, try to do something fun, try to plan a trip together, something like that. So I think for me, that was a really fun one that I had troubles putting down. It was just a very quick read. It was enjoyable. And yeah, I really enjoyed that one. What about you, Garrett?
That's good. No, I appreciate y'all sharing that. One quick comment there was, oddly enough, I've actually started to be more active on LinkedIn. And it was a little bit different, but I've started to try to intentionally post things about licensing and what it's more. The idea was kind of helping grow the simple modern awareness with people who I've connected with on LinkedIn who aren't yet partnering with us on licensing deals to kind of get in their feeds.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And just doing 4 or 5 posts and like how nervous I would get before I hit post.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And like, I'm just like, good grief. How do people do this daily
On
multiple?
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I'm truly like making it about, or trying to make it about the business. And I don't have LinkedIn on my phone. I only check it on the desktop, and I've tried to be like very self-disciplined to only check it at certain times, not throughout the day. And that's definitely helped. But man, I'm like, gosh, how to get out of the matrix. It's a real thing.
I liked one of your posts.
I saw that. I was like, man, who is that beefcake who looks like he can squat 700, who can squat 700 pounds that just liked my post? I meant to sneak that one in there before, about set. Like, I feel like you've mentioned how you squat 700 pounds in like the last 3 episodes. So
Have I really?
I was like, I got to try to sneak that in there when I asked you to intro Gates of Fire, and
let's see how many episodes we can go in a row.
Yeah. What do you think's harder, Flez, being frozen or squatting 700 pounds? My favorite book was Gates of Fire, and there's a few reasons why. It was in the last part of the year, right? Like, so Q4. And most of the year, I have read personal development books. And the 4 that we've read in the book club alone are more or less like nonfiction, personal development type books. And I think my mind was just getting weary of, I don't want to say learning, but just information consumption. And I can't remember the last time I've read a true novel. And you know, y'all can make fun. It's fine. But I really enjoyed like the romantic part of it. Like, it was a true story that captivated me. And I read books to my kids every night, and they love reading. They love listening to the stories. And it just made me realize as an adult, I really love a good story too. And it was just a really well-written story also. So I think a lot of it had to do with the timing, the topic that it was, and then just the writing was really, really good. And it really captivated me on a lot of fronts, from war to family to romance. It was really good. I really enjoyed that one.
You're welcome.
I am grateful for you.
Yeah, that book was awesome. That was my second time reading it, and it was just as good, if not better, the second time than the first time. Such a memorable novel.
So good.
Characters are great. The imagery just stays in your mind. It's just so good. Very well written. Good job, Stephen Pressfield.
Well done, sir. You know what I just thought of? This is like a big dream, but maybe in like 5-10 years, depending on everyone's situation, a future Books Brothers retreat is going to like Thermopylae,
Antarctica,
or going to Antarctica, or going to one of the blue zones or something like that.
They do a marathon in Antarctica every year.
Oh,
what?
Gosh.
Really?
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Maybe you can run it and we'll support you.
From here, over Zoom.
We'll just tune in. Well, that was great. So you all shared already a little bit about why you enjoyed each book, or why you enjoyed your favorite book. Regardless if it was from your favorite book or not of the year, what do you think are a couple takeaways or highlights? I can think of many things, but if you had to pick just like a couple things that rise to the top, what are some things that you've taken and applied in your own life from the books we've read that have made some material difference?
The first thing I think of is Blue Zones. And I think that Ruth was already on a bit of a nutrition kind of journey at that point when we were reading that. But she really enjoyed hearing about that book, and she enjoyed listening to those episodes and such. And so one thing that we've really sought to do since that time is more simple ingredient meals and such. So more single ingredient stuff, and just kind of keeping things as more natural as we can. And to this point, do I feel different because of that? I wouldn't say so, but I'd like to think that it's a helpful thing. So that was one that I feel like, that book really stressed on, and that's something that we're definitely still doing at this point.
We should probably clarify that last comment. For those of you listening who don't know Stalen's probably one of the most healthy, physically fit people you can meet. So that's probably why he doesn't feel too many differences.
I was thinking the same thing.
Guarantee if anyone applies things, the average American will notice literally life-changing benefits.
I mean, I can't lift 700 pounds, though, or can't deadlift.
We'll get you there. There it is. I'll get you there.
There it is. That was funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm finding it now, but I'm actually going to send you all one. So I feel like RFK is getting a bad rap.
Oh, Ruth is all about him. Ruth loves it. Yeah. And I mean, it's been interesting, learning more about him.
Yeah, but one thing I feel like learning more about him I could get on board with is, I guess he's not a fan of ultra-processed foods and stuff.
Yeah.
And the New York Times just did an article about it. Not so much about him, but about ultra-processed foods at a macro level in the U.S. And it made me think of Blue Zones and Scarcity Brain and things that we read. So here, sending it to you now. It's a good listen. It's not all that unsurprising, but it's just wild to listen to it. I can just echo a lot of what you were saying, Stalen. One of the other questions I want to ask later is, what's a book you all recommend that we didn't read as a group? One book that I read, it happened to be in parallel around the same time we read Scarcity Brain and Blue Zones, was Atomic Habits by James Clear. And I think reading that plus the Scarcity Brain, the things I was learning in those two books, it was kind of a perfect match of recognizing, man, I can make tiny tweaks in my life and they can stack on top of each other. And by the end of the year, I don't know how to test it, but this is probably the healthiest I've ever felt in my life.
Nice. That's awesome.
Holistically, from eating more vegetables than I've ever eaten. I always ate some, but incorporating it almost, daily into almost every single meal, or rucking. These are things that I learned about rucking from Scarcity Brain. And I learned about, maybe I should cut down a little bit on my meat consumption and some other health related things with Blue Zones, but then thinking of, I don't have to think of drastic changes. I need to find a new diet. I can just make little tweaks here and there. And James Clear talks about, if you make a 1% improvement every day, think of where you're going to be in a year. Those 1% add up. And I feel like I've experienced that firsthand. So those are a couple things, the rucking, and then I don't even want to call it diet modification, just food reprioritization and how I'm consuming it. Go ahead, Matt. I'm anxious to hear what you have to say.
I really want to become a Spartan warrior. Anyways, that was a complete joke. Some actual practical things. It's similar to you, Garrett. I've taken a lot from a mix of both Scarcity Brain and Blue Zones, just with my eating habits. I have started to, for my lunches, a couple times a week, just eat black beans and maybe some rice, and that's it.
Ooh, Dave Ramsey.
Yeah.
Rice and beans.
Blue Zones as well.
Yo.
Beans are really good. And I've been eating more almonds throughout my week. Yeah, absolutely. I love rice. Rice is delicious.
Matt, don't be a stereotype.
My kids love rice too,
Genes are strong.
and I'm very proud of them.
Do they love like a quarter rice
or half as much.
Yeah, just a quarter for them.
quarter
Yeah,
rice?
Yeah. Uh-huh. But one of I think it was from Icaria in Blue Zones, when they talk about just walking throughout your day. I bought a under the desk treadmill, and I've been using it almost every single work day since I bought it in June. So I walk at least 30 minutes every work day. If I don't, it's because either I'm sick or I'm doing some other workout for that day. My steps and mile count have gone up significantly. They've almost tripled since last year. I feel a little bit healthier just from moving more throughout the day. And yeah, one other thing that stuck out from Blue Zones is Hara Hachipu, or 80% full. I still think about that a lot. I don't necessarily abide by it all the time, but it's a work in progress. 1% increase every day, right? So, just trying to get healthier as a person by making little habits every day.
It's good, man. Have you noticed, Matt, during the holidays, Thanksgiving, the Christmas parties and stuff? For me, I'm like, oh, I'm really full. And like that's like more unique to me this year because Hara Hachibu. Like today, for example, I wasn't self-disciplined enough. I had a third piece of pizza at work. But throughout the year, I've been like, I'm going to stop at 2. I don't need to be full because A, pizza's not healthy. And then B, like I didn't pack my lunch, so I got it, our company provides free meals, so I'm going to eat that. But I don't have to eat till I'm full. And again, I don't do it perfectly, but I've noticed like going to the Christmas parties, it's like, okay, we're at a party. I'm going to enjoy myself. But then I'm like, wow, I'm full. I don't feel this way too often anymore. I wonder if you notice that at all or experience that at all.
Yeah, I've noticed that for sure. Doesn't mean I don't stop eating.
For sure.
I'm still eating, but yeah, I don't feel a need to eat as much as I can every time like I used to.
Yeah, I think that might be what I was ultimately getting at is it might feel hard at first. Like, oh, I still want to eat that one more piece of pizza. But then you almost get used to like, I'm content. I don't really feel that full. And then 80%, like your body catches up a little later. Like, oh, I had enough to eat. And then you kind of get used to that. It's kind of like what you said in the endurance in the endurance episode about like, it was so cold. The high was 2 degrees. And you're like, yeah, your body would adjust though. And to some extent, you adapt to the weather that you live in. So, when we go to Phoenix, we're like, oh my gosh, it's so hot. And Salen's like, yeah, it's okay. Like that's just, you adapt.
Yeah.
Flez, I don't think you've gone though.
Are we talking about other books we've read too?
We'll get to that. I'm curious if you had any thought or anything you wanted to share on a couple things you've applied to your life that have made material difference from what we read this year.
Just, being as courageous as Leonidas whenever I walk into these health clinics all day.
There you go. There you go. Hey.
They identify with Leonidas, huh?
The 60-year-old Leonidas or the 40-year-old Leonidas?
You're just a really big Gerard Butler fan, aren't you?
Hey, man. He's got some good flicks out there.
P.S. I love you.
You ever seen The Ugly Truth? The Ugly Truth is a good one.
Well, he'll be in the new live action How to Train Your Dragon movie, so keep an eye out.
Blue Zones was good, but I feel like I'm already really healthy. I'm already like a health nut. Like I have a smoothie I'm drinking right now that has enough nutrients.
Wine in it.
More like health nuts.
And since we're not on video, Flez is not just consuming a smoothie. from a cup like normal people. He is drinking it straight from the smoothie machine itself.
Like a real man.
Like Leonidas when he made his shakes.
Less dishes.
Exactly.
Practical, right?
Exactly.
Scarcity brain.
No, I think Scarcity Brain, I did go out. When we were reading that one, I did go out on a really, really hard ruck. It was like 0 degrees out and snowing and icing. And I went out and they were talking about like gear and stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Gear
that part.
stuff.
And I packed up a bag and took off. Did like a 4.5 mile hike, and it was freezing out. I had ice on my eyelashes, literally.
Dang, that's wild.
And so that book made me feel challenged, or feel like I should do some sort of challenge. So I had never done anything like that before. Blue Zones, as someone with a nutrition background, there were some things that I, had some discrepancies with. But I think overall it has a good message,
You had asked a minute ago, are we talking about other books that we didn't read in the book club? So maybe I'll kick it to you to start. Because, I know a couple books you didn't resonate as much with, which I personally enjoy. I like that we have contrarian views. Not everyone feels the same way about a certain book, and we have some, discussion in that regard. Were there any books, Flez, that you read this year on your own that you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite personal development books ever that I read this year is called The Road Less Traveled. It's by M. Scott Peck. Have you heard of it?
No.
No, it's really, really good. He starts off, his famous line is, life is tough. It's the first line in the book. It's basically, I just came up with a short summary here. It's about facing life's challenges with discipline and courage. He says growth comes from doing the hard work, delaying gratification, being honest, taking responsibility, and loving in a way that helps everyone grow. It's also about connecting with something greater than yourself to find purpose. So in short, it's about choosing the harder, more meaningful path in life. I just really highly recommend it. It's a good book.
Thanks for sharing. Staylin, Matt, what about you guys?
Yeah, I feel like I couldn't narrow it down to one. So there's a couple that I really enjoyed this year that I recommend. Has going through my Goodreads of some of my 5-star reviews this year, and some of the books for me that I've really enjoyed were kind of one on the business front, one on the more personal front, and then one on the story, like just a good story. I read the book Listen to Sell earlier this year. I've been doing sales now for a little over a year, and it's been an uncomfortable change at times, but this book really talks about kind of how to be a good salesman. You need to be like as genuine as you can and like truly believe in your product, what you're doing, and how you're going about it. And so that was a really impactful book for me and in my workplace. One that I really enjoyed, just really cool story. So I read a lot of Westerns this year. When I say Westerns, like historical. So, books about the historic West. And so one of them that I really enjoyed the most was Undaunted Courage. So it's by Stephen Ambrose, which he's most famously known for writing The Band of Brothers, which they made the TV series.
Great series.
Yeah. So Undaunted Courage it's basically a telling of the Lewis and Clark expedition. It's just very detailed, super cool to learn all the dates, the timelines, interactions it had. Really a cool one if you enjoy reading about the American West. And then one just kind of a guilty pleasure read is that I really enjoyed was 3 Nights in August. So this is a book about a sports writer followed Tony La Russa for a couple days back in, I think it was like the 2003 season. So it's a very old book, very dated book, but a huge baseball fan. St. Louis Cardinals are my team, the best team in baseball, even if they don't make the playoffs. And just a really great like baseball book. A lot of talk of strategy. This guy the writer shadowed Tony La Russa for the year. And then after doing so, he wrote a book on just 3 nights, 3 baseball games against the Chicago Cubs. And it was basically just the retelling of that and all the strategy, and just super fun read as a baseball fan.
Funny story about Tony La Russa. So every year, my high school baseball team would play our rival team at Busch Stadium. This is back when he was still the manager for the Cardinals, and I'll never forget, we were in their dugout, and we played after the Cardinals played, and he comes out on his phone in the dugout, and he had his pants down on his ankles, talking on the phone.
It's not the
Not
the classiest guy. It's also enjoyed himself a few drinks in his day. Great baseball coach, though.
Oh yeah, one of the best.
Yeah, until he hit 85, then he really struggled. Who doesn't at 85? You know.
Oh man, that's wild. Yeah, my cousin-in-law was getting his physical therapy degree and did his internship with the Kansas City Royal spring training in Arizona. And it was a spring training after they won the World Series. And he tells me this funny story, speaking of managers, where as one of the PT guys, he has to get there before all the players do. So he's there. He's like getting in the building, and he is like getting from the parking lot into the building, and he starts hearing from long way off like a car just bumping to some rap, and it's like blaring loud, just thump, like the bass is going. It's Ned Yost.
That's awesome.
He was probably, how old was he at that time?
I mean, he had to have been in his 60s, like, just not who you thought was going to get out of the car.
That's awesome.
And so he just told me that story.
Hey, they're people too. They're people too.
They're people too. That's good. Matt, what about you?
It's really hard for me to pick one book. I read.
Pick 3.
I might choose 5.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
So I read 38 books this year in total.
Ooh.
My Goodreads year in review just came out today, so it was kind of fun looking at that.
Yeah.
Nice.
The most books I've ever read in a year. My goal was 20, and I almost doubled it. So pretty proud of that. I might double it by the end of the year.
Yeah, there's 13 days left in the year.
Yeah. So
Perfect. Get off the call so you can do it.
In the sci-fi fantasy genre, I really loved. It's called Defiant. It's the 4th and final book in the series by Brandon Sanderson. It's so good. The Republic of Thieves was such a fun book. It's a kind of a urban heist / fantasy book where it's this group of sophisticated thieves that pull off these super elaborate heists, and they're well educated. They rip off like the wealthy upper class people by doing these months-long, year-long schemes and pulling them off. And it's just, the characters are great, a lot of fun. And then the other fantasy genre, I just read this trilogy called the Lycanius trilogy, and it's similar to The Wheel of Time and Brandon Sanderson style. He's a first-time author for this series, but he's also really into debating theology, specifically predestination and morality, and he weaves that into a story. So it's really cool to have this epic fantasy story. It wraps up really well, but throughout the entire thing, it weaves in doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And making choices based on what good morality looks like. And there's a lot of gray area, and some people think that they are right because of their beliefs and what they believe in, but others, could believe in something else. So what is exactly the right choice to do in that situation? I don't know. It's just fascinating. And then I guess I'll just do one more. Letters to the Church by Francis Chan was so good. Talks about the problem with American churches today and how to get back to what the Bible actually says about what the church should look like and how people should act within it, how leaders should act within it. Very good read. Pretty short and well written. Yeah. I could talk about like 10 more books, but I won't bore you guys.
Thanks.
I love it. No, I love it. That's great.
No, that's a Dumb and Dumber quote.
Dumb and Dumber quote.
I'm glad you got that, Matt, because that would have seemed really offensive if you did not reference it. Yes, I love it too, in all seriousness. Yeah, I'll do a throwback. So I think this was the book that started this whole thing, and I was not a part of the book club yet, but I caught up when we were reading Scarcity Brain and read Comfort Crisis as well. And I already hit on Atomic Habits. That was really influential as I look back at my list. But Comfort Crisis, I think, has stuck out because I think it's almost like the foundation for some of the other books that I've read, I think, where like Scarcity Brain, in order to press into some of the non-primal elements, you like that will require discomfort or having new habits, developing new habits, or instituting hara hachebu and not eating till you're full, or eating more vegetables when you just want to like add on another steak or whatever. There's an element of like embracing discomfort, and that's something that, and what I liked about that book too is he weaved in that personal story about how he went like elk hunting in Alaska.
I think it was caribou, wasn't it?
Caribou, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I just thought his writing was just incredible. It was like a book where I would get mad when the chapter would end. I'm like, no, like don't stop the story. Tell me what happened next. And it was just a really great way of storytelling, and then also weaving that into the thesis of his book. So that was my favorite if I had to pick one. What was the highlight for you guys? Not necessarily even like reading a book. It could be the retreat, whatever you guys want. But as far as like the group of guys that we have here, I know a couple aren't on the call right now. But what was a highlight for you guys this year?
I mean, for one, I would say that one for me personally is just becoming more comfortable with it in general. I know it caused a lot of discomfort. I didn't even want to lead any of these for a while. Yeah. And I haven't felt that discomfort for a while. And it's been fun to lead some recently. So I think just the growth in that has been good for me personally. And then outside of that, for sure, the retreat and getting through the challenge with all you guys and getting to see everybody was awesome. So, yeah, those two for sure.
Nice. Yeah, dude, Flez, I love when you lead, man. You always make us laugh the most. I think it was really fun when we were doing Ancient Generation. When we had Brooke and Jamie on. I think it was just added a kind of a different layer, adding a female voice in. And then really, I mean, we joked about this a lot, but really having actually two people who know what they're talking about on the topic. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I'd have to say the retreat for me. It was just so good to see everyone in person. Glad we could all get our schedules aligned and actually make it happen. But spending that time with y'all was really, really great. I think about it a lot. Besides that, I think just the consistency of meeting, it's been really good.
Yeah, agreed.
Always good to catch up with you guys.
For sure.
Talk.
100.
It was interesting timing. I was rucking at the office, and I was just going to work.
Just sweating bullets in the office.
Sweating bullets, man. And one of my coworkers who we're in a very similar stage of life. He's like a year or two older than me. His wife just had their third child last year and kind of had a non-traditional route to how he came to Simple Modern. He was in ministry for a while, and we just relate on a lot of things in our work experience. Basically, we started talking about this book I just saw on his phone. He was listening to an audiobook, and the conversation expanded, and I had never told him about the podcast and the book club. He knew about the retreat. He knew about the Grand Canyon, and we started talking about it, and he asked me a really interesting question. I'll probably butcher how he originally asked it, but he basically was like, hey, what do you get out of doing something like that, like a book club? It was a really interesting question, because like it had a very much like, it kind of had a vibe like I don't do anything unless there's some productivity output that is associated with something, which I think is just very standard these days in American Western culture, which we talked about. But answering his question on face value, I've thought about that a lot since I've joined this, even before we hit record. And I think that's my highlight. It's benefits and some of the joy that I've experienced from this that I never could have anticipated when Stalin first invited me to join. I joined when Stalin invited me. I jumped at it because I was in between moving cities and kind of at a tough kind of spot in my life relationally with community, in between cities, in between churches, coming out of the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. But then it's just really evolved in a way that I couldn't have imagined. And to be brief, I think just reconnecting with some of you, or basically all of you, right? Like Rob, I probably kept up with the most, but it doesn't even compare to a bi-weekly touch base like this. And then, doing things like the retreat. And then you can, some of the things that have come from the podcast. It's like, I learned how to do something new. I didn't know how to publish a podcast. I learned something new. That's fun. This has been a very good outlet of time, hobby-wise. We've talked about some of that in like the mask of masculinity, like the sexuality mask, or just, life is hard and screens are everywhere, and there's a lot of temptation and ways to really not use your time wisely late at night or any time of the day. And knowing that I better read these chapters and keep up to date, with our reading plan and getting on these calls, it's been a great use of my free time and a great, what I would call a hobby. And then developing my public speaking skills. I'd never noticed how much I said the word like until I heard myself on record. Like there's so many ways I could answer the question, from my own speaking ability to deep connection. Exactly. To deep connections with you guys, rekindling those friendships, to developing a habit of reading where I made a goal, and I'll end it this way. I made a goal the night before I turned 30. I made goals for my 30s that I'd read 30 books in this next decade. And
how many are you at?
I'll be at about 26 this year alone.
Nice.
So I'm like 3 books a year. That's a stretch goal.
Just 4 more to go the rest of the time. That's great, man. You can.
There you go. Then I don't have to read again for the next 6 years. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, I like reading. Reading is fun. I actually have time to read it because I'm not spending my time, on my phone or doing other silly things. And there's just been so many positive things that I never could have imagined joining a book club.
Guys, what I've enjoyed most is the lucrative sponsors, the rich royalties, the private jets. Becoming famous overnight is hard.
Amen.
But I think we all handled it very, very well. I mean, going from 0 to 240 followers, not 240 million. It's I wake up and I put my pants on much more differently, knowing that I have a spot in this world.
We're also humble about it too, right? We're the most humble about getting famous.
I'm totally kidding. Oh man,
that's so funny.
No, I think Garrett, you were getting on a good roll there. I've personally enjoyed just talking with you guys and like dissecting books. I think sometimes when we talk, we each want to answer the question, and sometimes it's a little less conversational. So I've enjoyed the times when we're more when we're more conversational, and I think a lot of good conversations have happened offline, like through the phone calls where guys are calling other guys that maybe, like you said, Garrett, we might have not have called. So I think that's been one of the highlights. I did really enjoy the Jamie and Brooke highlight. I thought that was really cool to just bring in some experts as well. Obviously, the retreat was definitely a high, something to celebrate for sure. And then, yeah, Garrett as well. I know that I say, I think, or obviously a lot. I say that a decent amount at work, but it makes you want to be a better speaker when you do something like this too. And I shared at the beginning of all of this when we started recording like a year ago that me and reading have been hot and cold. It's sometimes I'm about it, sometimes I'm not about it. And I think you guys have probably seen that. I think I've been the one that's probably skipped the most books this year, like 3 books maybe this year. But it's always good to get back in and get reading, and I do enjoy it. It just takes me a little while to kind of get hot about it again. But yeah, overall, just a lot of intangibles, like you were saying, Garrett, and I'm sure you guys have probably all said of the podcast, but then, the tangible brotherhood, reminiscing on old times, laughing. Those have been great memories for me. And one other thing I was going to say about just enjoying the podcast, I know we've kind of like died down a little bit in terms of like applying pressure on trying to like really grow this thing, and it's just really just us recording, and if it goes anywhere, great. If it doesn't, not a big deal. But some of those early on stages of, watching views grow or getting some followers, and Garrett, I think you drop in and be like, we gained Saudi Arabia today, and it's like it's just Garrett's VPN when he's in Vegas or something, and we're still celebrating it like it's like the United Emirates,
Saudi Arabian oil prince.
Yeah, we got the Dubai prince over here listening to the Books Brothers podcast.
Hey.
But
yeah,
so I enjoyed some of that as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, guys, it's been a great year. It was our first full calendar year of doing the podcast, and we made it all the way through. We're coming up on our 50th episode, and more importantly, as you guys have heard through our conversations, this has been much more than a podcast. The book club means a lot to us. And yeah, we hope that if you don't have a group like this, but people that might be interested in, it might take that courageous first step that Fles talked about in initiating that, because you won't regret doing that and you will only benefit from it. So we hope that we'll leave you with that encouragement as we end 2024. So thank you for joining us for the last time in 24 of this episode of the Books Brothers podcast. We will return in 2025. Next week, we will pick back up Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage by Alfred Lansing, and we will discuss part 2. If you've enjoyed listening or benefited from our conversation, please subscribe, give us a review, and share with a friend that you want to connect deeper with. Lastly, we would love to hear your thoughts. You can reach us by email at connect@booksbrotherspodcast.com or on Instagram @booksbrotherspodcast. Until next week, read, reflect, and connect.